A lot of players through the years have grown a sentiment towards Warlock players having some of the best transmogs in the game. They're very consistently good when brought out, and it's hard to find a set that isn't worthy of praise when it comes to the aesthetics of Warlocks, Blizzard's pseudo golden child edge class. But which of them is the best and wanted the most? To begin this list, we have the Balespider's Vestments. This set was added to WoW as the 12th tier reward from the Firelands raid in Cataclysm. To obtain this set, you would just need to run the raid of the same name and progressively earn the transmog as you kill the bosses within. Since Cataclysm came out after Wrath of the Lich King, Blizzard had started to add normal and heroic difficulties universally for their raids. So because of this, there were many different colors to the tier sets in order to make them different from each other. So while there are technically 4 different difficulties in Firelands, there are only 2 different recolors of the set. This is because the sets would just use the same color for 10 and 25 man based on normal and heroic effects that followed it. So you can do both 10 and 25 man normal for this same set color, if that's what you desired. You can actually buy most of this set for gold from the Justice Quartermasters in both Stormwind and Orgrimmar respectively based on your faction. This is because, back in the day, you'd be able to purchase raid gear with a currency called Valor Points. This was obtained by just completing a weekly amount of heroic dungeons and spent on the gear you desired in the first place. Although those currencies have since been removed from the game. So instead of just making the sets completely unobtainable or only obtainable for the raid itself, the currency was replaced with gold, and you can actually learn this entire set for no more than 3 gold. At least the normal version of it you can. For the heroic version, you're going to need to run the raid. However, this isn't exactly a difficult process at all, and just requires a bit of luck with Cataclysm being so old nowadays. It's not too hard to obtain the set altogether, especially with the existence of alts. Now, the reason this set is wanted in the first place is because often players just enjoy the fire aesthetic that came from the Firelands raid as a whole. This is very popularly known or even memed on as the Fireland Andes transmogs because a lot of players often would farm the mounts that come from Firelands itself, that being the Flame Talon of Elisrazor and the Pureblood Firehawk mounts. These are typically among the first mounts a player will attempt to farm out if they seek to expand their mount collection, because they are some of the easiest to farm with the access of multiple modes and a relatively easy raid to traverse. You technically don't even have to kill every boss, you can just kill Shanox and then move into Balrog for Ragnaros' loot. So during this farm, you are passively farming the transmog for this entry, and it becomes a pretty widely used set for the more casual Warlock player, because they don't actually main the class, but this just so happens to be one of the only fully completed mogs they have. Plus, it just looks great, so there's no real downside or problem with it, as many others try to argue about it with other Warlock sets. It's actually also used on WoW's most famous Warlock in the franchise, Gul'dan, in their Heroes of the Storm MOBA game as a skin variant. It would seem that even Blizzard agrees that this is one of their favorites amongst the many Warlock transmogs we see. So while it is a nice looking set, it's only at number 10 because people don't actually seek it out a whole lot intentionally, and rather it's a side addition to their mount grind. And for those who actually do want the set, it's bonus points. And at number 9, we have the Hexflame Coven Set. While some players may not immediately recognize what this set is, that's because it's actually the very first tier set for Warlocks in the Nurubar's Palace, Wars Within's first raid tier. To farm it will be relatively simple, like many of the soon-to-be entries on this list, and it will simply require the Warlock to run the Nurubar Palace on the difficulty of their choosing. PvE has a large 4 different recolors ranging from LFR all the way to Mythic, but PvP also has its own distinct 2 hues. Upon a better look at this transmog, one might realize they actually take great inspiration from the Shivara demons of Legion. If you are unfamiliar with the Legion, they are basically a tyrannical elite force of demons that wreak havoc across the cosmos in an attempt to remove all life from the universe before the Void can claim it all instead. Their leader, Sargeras, was defeated, however, so any demons found nowadays are considered renegade, or were given their free will once again since Sargeras can no longer lord over them constantly. This set very much draws themes from Shivara. Yes, but more distinctly, the Coven of Shivara fight itself from Mantor's The Burning Throne. It really helps sell that sweet look of a coven while also veiling your character behind an anonymous shroud. Even more wicked is that every set for a long time now actually has a unique mythic visual effect that appears occasionally. With this set, it actually causes the infamous 6 arms of Shivara to appear and rise around your character at random intervals. You can also obtain this same effect on the various other recolors of the non-mythic set, and this will presumably be reward from the Keystone Hero, Mythic Queen Ansarek, and or hitting the elite rank in the PvP bracket. It's a brand new set, so reactions may be a little mixed at first, which is a big reason it's only at number 9 for now. But with a little bit of time, we're confident a lot of Warlock players will rush to obtain this set for their characters, particularly the helmet slot due to the veil that hides your character's face, and the floating Legion eye above your head. It's certainly a great appeal to the Warlock fantasy, and it's always nice to semi-cosplay as named characters from WoW's lore, which actually leads us to our next entry. And at number 8, we have the Shadow Council's Mantle. Otherwise known as the Earth Ripple shoulder pads, these shoulders will drop from the Blackrock Foundry. During Warlords of Draenor, Blizzard had begun to dump more resources into their new raid difficulty, Mythic. This is because it was the hardest mode there is for raiding that even now a very small amount of people actually participate to its full extent. Because of this difficulty and learning curve adjustment, Blizzard made tier sets from Mythic raiding a special cutting edge above the rest, with much more improved visuals and themes all around. This was the case for every class at the time, and of course, Warlocks were no different. Despite Mythic raiding being overly complicated, this raid is thankfully many years old now, so it makes for a good transmog farm in WoD, especially for Blackhand's Mount. For this entry, however, we are very specifically talking about the shoulder pads and not the tier set as a whole, even if it is too something cool. These shoulder pads are actually very similar in appearance to the popular Warlock Gul'dan's very own. The only difference being there's less spikes on your character's spine, or rather none at all really. But it does have the same armor pieces he has, and as close to the spikes on his back as you can get with these shoulder pads. Thankfully, because of this, you can make some pretty good Gul'dan lookalike Mogs for your Warlock character, and become the new sitting leader of the Shadow Council. It makes these shoulders very wanted, as Gul'dan is easily the most renowned Warlock in the Warcraft lore, appearing multiple times in other Blizzard media such as Hearthstone and Heroes of the Storm. He was even the final boss of the following expansion's raid, Nighthold, where we can see him once again with the same shoulders we took from Blackrock Foundry. Although this time, as the fight progresses, Gul'dan gets a bit more roided up on Fel energy, and we start to look a lot less like him because of it. But Gul'dan ends up dying in the end, so who really is the better Warlock? Either way, it's always super fun to be able to cosplay popular characters at WoW, but these particular shoulder pads can be used on every cloth class and race, so long as you loot the Earth Ripple shoulder pads themselves and not the Warlock tier, as those are class exclusive. This makes them wanted slightly more due to the fact that priests could be super edgy for even their Shadow Priest transmogs, limiting no one to the general hot topic look Gul'dan gives off. And at number 7, we have the hidden Skull of Manari's artifact appearance. Back in Legion, players would set off to personally acquire a new weapon designed around their class and specialization. In the case of Demonology players, this came in the form of the Skull of Manari. Basically, this weapon used to be a living Eridar before Sargeras had arrived on their homeworld of Argus. The skull's name is Thal'Kiel, and he was once a master summoner for the Eridar people, but once reached far into the void at one point and called upon its power. During this time, his apprentice, none other than Archimonde, discovered his betrayal to the void and called upon Argus's rulers to strike him down. Thal'Kiel was defeated, and his skull was put on display as a warning to others. Eventually, down the road, his skull was repurposed, and the soul of Thal'Kiel himself continued to live through it, and Warlock players would go on to collect it as their artifact weapon. He even talks to you as you perform content throughout the Legion expansion, and as a former Eridar himself, he looks down upon the ones that had joined the Legion after slaying him. Interestingly, for artifact weapons, they all had different appearances that you could pick from, varying from an upgraded version to a complete rehaul from the original. Each spec also had a hidden version where the game does not directly tell you how to collect it, and you must find the hidden puzzle pieces to use it. For the appearance in this entry, you must collect 5 different Eridar heads from Eridar mobs in Legion zones. If you're confused on what an Eridar is, they're basically the red and dark skinned Rena you see in various areas using fel spells and dark magic. Killing any of them has a low chance to give you their head upon looting them, going through 5 different grey item versions of them until eventually you get the hidden artifact version as the final. When you learn the hidden artifact to add to your appearance, you can see it's still your artifact weapon, but a lot more fleshy and ghostly than before. It seems as if Thal'Kiel possesses the head to command himself easier alongside you, and even makes banter towards you with it, saying things like,
"You know, I've been rather missing having some skin on my bones. Maybe there's something we can do about that."
And when you start to collect the heads, you can see he's a bit picky about what you give him, saying,
"No, lower caste, won't do it all. Not bad, not bad. Green eyes, though. Mine were gray. No, wrong skin color entirely. That won't do. Ugh, that head reminds me of an uppity apprentice I had. Get rid of it."
And finally, when you loot the head, Thal'Kiel will remark,
"That's it, that's the one. Give it to me immediately."
It's a super funny exchange to behold, and being able to walk around with the Headless Demon essentially as you play your Warlock is pretty up there in terms of class fantasy. Although with Legion being so old now, this appearance has seen a decline in its usage, and is even a little buggy at times. sometimes spawning a second head that follows you, or Thalkill just floats around in completely wrong areas that he's supposed to. Regardless, it's a fun addition for sure, and Warlocks were often seen farming Eridar mobs for their special head transmogs. And at number 6, we have the Corruptor Raiment. This transmog was added all the way back in the Burning Crusade and was the second tier set of the expansion as a whole. This set can be obtained through the Serpent Shrine Cavern raid and its mini bosses, given you're playing a Warlock obviously. It's not an overly complex farm in the slightest, and you just need to zone in, kill some bosses, and get a little lucky. Rinse and repeat. There is a second version of this tier set, but it's just slightly darker version of this set. This is the PvP recolor, and to get it, it just requires a bit more steps. To purchase it, you must obtain the Marks of Honor items that can be passively earned through virtually any activity, so long as it involves PvP. Once you have 12 of them, you can buy the entire set and wear it as much as you like. The big reason this set is wanted, despite its age, is the large iconicism associated with it. This set practically lives and breathes the Warlock culture, and it's hard to ignore the fan arts and official Blizzard media that is used creating this set to demonstrate its epic look. But that's really all it has going for it, unfortunately. It's nothing super rare or prestigious, so less and less people seem to care about it seemingly, but it does share the classic feel players really enjoy. It would actually be a really good set to redo someday if Blizzard ever decides to up-res a tier set again, like they did in Tomb of Sargeras. Basically, if you want to look like an OG Warlock, this is the set to do it, and nothing can go wrong with the style of an edgelord. And at number 5, we have the Deathbringer's Garb. This set was added in Wrath of the Lich King from the mini bosses of Ulduar. Ulduar is known to many as the godfather of hard mode raiding, as Blizzard had introduced optional mechanics for players to participate in, and doing so will net them additional loot they otherwise would not have been able to get. Because of this, Ulduar quickly became popular amongst players and eventually made way for heroic and mythic raiding that we understand today. Now, in a quick look, this set already checks off the mini marks usually needed for a good Warlock set. It's edgy, dark, and even brings in the theme of a Plague Doctor to really mesh it all together. Plus, it has 2 variants that can be collected, a somewhat brighter orange color that can be obtained from 10-man, and the more infamously known purple variant on 25. At least, that's what the Collections tab in-game will tell you. The reality is Ulduar doesn't have any of these modes anymore, because Blizzard had eventually turned it into a time logging raid. To simplify the loot tables between the two, as time logging would need to scale with a player count of 10 to 30 at a time instead of 10 or 25 flat, the loot tables of both modes were combined. So really, if you have it set to 25 man before entering the raid, it doesn't actually do anything, and you're farming both of the sets all the same. Another big reason this set is wanted, however, is that it's actually the same armor that Grand Apothecary Putris wears, otherwise known as the undead that orchestrated the events of the Wrathgate, WoW's first in-game cinematic. Putris is one of the most popular characters in WoW despite his incredibly short screen time for just the sheer popularity of the Wrathgate cinematic and completely dreadful apparel. While his armor is actually green, where ours could be orange and purple, it's still the closest things players can get to looking like a mad scientist such as he. Maybe you don't even know who Putris is, but you still like the set a lot anyways, which still earns it many points just due to being really true to Warlock's natures. Though, due to its age and increase of many other mogs, less people are seen using this iconic transmog. Though this isn't to say it doesn't have its uses for things like roleplay, often being the key transmogs to have as a Plague Doctor type character for this very reason. It's even used by the Black Harvest Invokers in the Warlock class hall. Regardless, it's number 5 for our list. And at number 4, we have Ulthalesh, the Deadwind Harvester's Appearance. More specifically, this entry is talking about the Affliction Warlocks PvP and Balance of Power versions of their artifact. As previously discussed, players in Legion were all given different artifacts based around their specializations, and in the case for Affliction Warlocks, they would be given Ulthalesh, a mighty scythe capable of harvesting souls of the dead. To obtain the Balance of Power version we mentioned a second ago, you would need to complete a questline of the same name. This basically sends your character down a large rabbit hole of Legion content that eventually evolves to clearing Nighthold every week. This whole ordeal takes about 2 months to complete if you're consistent in completing the requirements for it, and is thankfully account-wide. So if you've actually done it on another character, you already have this artifact. There are another 3 recolors though, and to obtain them, you will need to kill 8 different Legion world bosses, complete a plus 15 mythic keystone, and achieve the Glory of the Legion hero achievement. Once you have these things, then you'll be set and can wield this wicked scythe as you wish. Following this, we probably have one of the best looking scythes in the game, arguably. These are obtained from hitting certain levels of prestige in PvP, which basically just means your honor level. Honor level is also thankfully account wide, and you earn it by just doing any variant of PvP activities, and it will passively increase as you do so. It will start at level 10, then 30, 50, and finally 80. Once you've done this, all PvP appearances of an artifact are unlocked, and you can also wield this scythe as you please. It's just super cool of Blizzard to utilize a scythe in WoW, and it's rare we actually get to see them do so to such a heavy degree, like the Affliction artifact weapon. Hopefully we get more in the future, and with any luck, this entry won't be the last we see of them, or Ulthalesh as a whole. And at number 3, we have the Legion Order Hall set. This set, as it implies, is the name that was added in Legion and is the benchmark set color for outdoor content in various Legion zones. Basically, if you are actively participating in the world content in Legion, like world quests, reputations, and sometimes dungeons, you will earn progress towards the set. Now, the set itself may not look like much when you consider the other Warlock sets that exist, but this set is actually a recolor of the wildly popular Challenge Mode set from Mists of Pandaria. Originally, Mists of Pandaria, players could run challenge modes, which basically just threw you into a dungeon of heroic difficulty and timed down the duration. They were a small test into Mythic Plus we know today, but not so much with the damage scaling. Essentially, if you completed the dungeon in a certain amount of time, you reward with gold, silver, or bronze medals, depending on how fast you completed the dungeon. In order to obtain the original set, you need to complete every single mop dungeon as gold, then you would have access to buy the set pieces as you wish to transmog. Though if you compare the two side by side, you start to see that the mop version is like an upgraded sort of look compared to what you can actually get in Legion. Mostly larger horns, shoulder pads, and a completely different color scheme overall. Funny enough, every single class got a version of these sets that could be considered a lesser version. They actually all use existing assets of the original sets completely because back in Mop Beta, these sets were all data mined to have up to 3 versions of themselves. And it wasn't until Legion that at least one of them was brought back for everyone, and was also slightly downsized in the process. So because the original Mop sets were completely removed, and a lot of people who missed out on them still want them, that's where these sets come in. They are highly coveted because it's the closest thing a player can get to recovering them, and players just have to make do. Maybe someday Blizzard can instead re-add these sets as they've existed long enough. They're no longer prestigious for overcoming the challenge it originally presented, but more so just for playing Mop when it was current, as the skill of players has grown exponentially since back then. And at number 2, we have the Trading Post / Mop Remix set. These mini sets were added recently after the introduction of the Trading Post in Dragonflight, or at least the Alluring Call version of them. If you're unfamiliar with the Trading Post, it's essentially a vendor that rotates every month with special cosmetics typically relating to that month, with a universal currency you gain from just playing the game. This currency comes in the form of Traders' Tenders and can be used to purchase virtually everything on the Trading Post. In November 2023, Blizzard added a set that consisted of a helmet, shoulders, and belt exclusive to Warlock players. It also had a staff, offhand, and dagger, but these weapons had to be purchased separately. Regardless, once it was December, these transmogs would rotate out from the Trading Post without a named date on when or if they would return to their original source. This makes them highly coveted as they have an insanely unique appeal to them in the form of their mini set. Rather than a full set that is completed when all the pieces are put together, a player must instead find matching attire of their own accord. Thankfully, depending on the time you're watching this video, there was another recolor of this set from the Mop Remix event that could be purchased for bronze, another universal currency depending on the game mode alone. The weapons were also included in this bunch, and it gives players a chance to collect the Trading Post aesthetic, at least without having to be around during the November of 2023. Really, it's just peak Warlock, and because of their scarcity, it's hard to really come across this transmog because the Trader's Tender is a valuable resource, as you only receive a very limited amount of it a month. So the only real people with this transmog are likely die-hard Warlock fans, and even if you were a fan of the concept, you couldn't get it because you reserved your currency for another class's own mini set. Hopefully it returns in the near future, or at least with another recolor of the original, just so no one feels like they missed out as the months go by. And at number 1, we have the TOS / Black Temple sets, but primarily the Mage Tower variant. In par with the various Legion entries on this list, we have the original Malefic Raiment tier set from the Burning Crusade expansion. This was added for Warlocks during the Black Temple raid, and it came in 2 different colors, one for PvP and another for raiding. To get this raid set, you just needed to complete Black Temple with some RNG, like a majority of the sets on this list. And the PvP one will require 12 Marks of Honor once again. They are noticeably lower resolution than other transmogs of course, but the main talking point comes from their helmet. It may look demonic and edgy on its own, but the helmet has the unique effect that no other set has truly recreated, that when you jump with it, either equipped or transmog, a great pair of demonic wings will appear from your character's back and flap once, matching the color of your set. They look utterly fantastic, and we'd actually seen a return of the same set many years later in the Legion expansion. During the Tomb of Sargeras raid, Blizzard instead opted to remake the sets from the Black Temple for every class that existed at the time, and brought them into the modern version of WoW's graphics. This includes the popular wing animation that appears when you jump with the helmet on. Each set, whether it be LFR, PvP, or Mythic, had the cool effects of wings formed on your spine and showing off to your entire raid group. You're just that much cooler than they are. Only this time, to farm it, you needed to be running Tomb of Sargeras on the respective mode for the color you may desire. PvP was the same as usual and can still be obtained for just 12 marks of honor, although the biggest talking point of this entry is specifically the Mage Tower. The Mage Tower was a system in Legion that sent a player into a solo scenario where they fight a boss all alone that is specifically tailored to their specialization skills. It truly tests the mettle of your skill with a spec and proves you know how to play a class if you can say you've completed a Mage Tower as a certain class. To prove you achieved this, and as a reward, you are given a special recolor of the same Tomb of Sargeras set from before, only this time with the additional mythic-like visual effects that something like normal mode could not recreate. In the case of the Warlocks, this still includes the special wings that flap at your back in a futuristic red and black color scheme. Essentially, if you've seen a Warlock using the Mage Tower set, you can know they're a pretty capable player and are rocking the set that is definitely ahead of the Transmog curve. Alright, and that's the video. Are there any other highly sought after Warlock transmogs that we may have missed? Or do you have any ideas for future videos just like this one? If so, let us know down in the comments below.